Sarah's phone vibrated on her office desk at 2:37 p.m. on an ordinary Tuesday. She was reviewing financial spreadsheets when a notification lit up the screen. A message from her father, Richard, that she hadn't expected. "I've abandoned you as of today. All family ties are severed. You made your choice." Sarah read the words 3 times, each reading confirming what her eyes saw, but her mind was still trying to process. 29 years of daughter reduced to a 17-word text message. Her hands didn't tremble as she typed the reply. Just 2 words. "Understood. Thank you." Then she did something that would change everything. She opened her laptop, accessed her bank account, and methodically initiated every cancellation, automatic transfer, recurring payment, every financial link she had connected to the family that had just discarded her. What Richard didn't know was that those ties added up to far more than he ever imagined, and what happened in the next 72 hours would destroy the empire he had built on the back of his own daughter. To understand why Sarah responded with such coldness to being disinherited, we need to go back 6 months, when everything began to fall apart. Sarah was a financial manager at a technology company in Seattle, earning $95,000 a year, a comfortable salary she had earned through hard work after graduating with a degree in accounting. She was meticulous, organized, and above all, loyal to her family. Her father, Richard, owned a chain of 3 restaurants in Portland, the pride of the family, the legacy he constantly reminded everyone he was building. Her mother, Patricia, was the perfect businessman's wife, always elegant, always supportive of her husband, always keeping up appearances. And there was her younger brother, Marcus, 25 years old, the golden son who could do anything wrong and still be forgiven. Marcus nominally worked as a manager of one of the restaurants, but everyone knew he spent more time in bars than supervising employees. The family dynamic had always been clear. Richard made the decisions, Patricia supported them unconditionally, Marcus was spoiled and protected, and Sarah was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who quietly solved problems behind the scenes. Everything changed the day Richard called Sarah in a panic. It was a Friday night and she was having dinner with friends when the phone rang insistently. "Sarah, I need you." Her father's voice was tense, almost desperate. "It's the main restaurant. We have a serious cash flow problem. The bank will foreclose on the loan if we don't deposit $50,000 by Monday." Sarah felt her stomach clench. $50,000. It was almost everything she had saved in the last 5 years. "Dad, that's a lot of money. What happened?" "I don't have time to explain now," Richard replied sharply. "Are you going to help your family or not? You're my daughter. That's what family is for." There it was, family guilt being used as a weapon. Sarah knew this pattern well. Throughout his life, whenever Richard needed something, he invoked the sacred concept of family. But when Sarah needed emotional support, validation, or simple recognition, he was either too busy or said she was being dramatic. But this time was different. It was about the survival of the family business, the legacy Richard valued so much. Sarah took a deep breath. "Okay, Dad, I'll transfer the money tomorrow morning." The relief in Richard's voice was palpable. "You're a good daughter, Sarah. I always knew I could count on you." He hung up before she could say anything else. That was the first of many requests. In the following weeks, Richard kept calling. Another $10,000 to cover payroll, then $15,000 for suppliers, then $8,000 for urgent kitchen repairs. Each time he used the same phrase. "It's only temporary. You'll get it all back as soon as things get better." Sarah kept a meticulous spreadsheet of every transfer, every deposit, every penny she sent. It was her training as an accountant, always documenting everything. By the end of 4 months, she had transferred $127,000 to her father's accounts. It was literally all her savings, plus $12,000 she had put on her personal credit card. But what really broke Sarah wasn't the money. It was what she discovered on an unplanned visit to Portland. It was her mother's birthday, and Sarah decided to surprise her, driving 3 hours from Seattle without warning. When she arrived at her parents' house, the house bought with a down payment she had helped pay for years ago, she found luxury cars parked in the garage. A party was underway. Sarah entered through the side door, which was always left open, and heard voices and laughter coming from the living room. She recognized her father's voice, loud and confident, the tone he used when impressing people. "The truth is, my eldest daughter never understood how business works," Richard was saying. "She's good with numbers, sure, but she lacks vision. That's why she works for other people while I build an empire. She even asked me to return some money I lent her, as if I didn't have bigger plans to multiply that investment." Laughter followed. Sarah froze in the hallway, hidden behind the wall, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear. "But you'll pay her back, won't you?" a female voice asked. Sarah recognized as Aunt Helen, Patricia's sister. "Eventually," Richard replied in a casual tone that made Sarah's blood boil. "But first, I need to make sure Marcus is settled. He's the one who's going to take over the business, after all. Sarah will be fine. She has a stable job. She doesn't need the money like Marcus does." "Sarah has always been the most independent," Patricia added, her voice soft but firm. "She doesn't need us in the same way. Marcus, on the other hand, needs guidance, support. It's our duty as parents to prioritize those who need it most." Sarah felt nausea rising in her throat. She wasn't the responsible daughter, she was the convenient daughter, the family's emotional and financial ATM. She silently retreated, exited through the same side door, and returned to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, just breathing, processing, feeling something fundamental break inside her. It wasn't anger yet, it was clarity, cold, cutting clarity that she had never been truly valued. She was merely useful. That night, Sarah drove back to Seattle in silence. No music, no calls, just the sound of the engine and her own thoughts. When she got home at 11 p.m., she opened her laptop and began doing something she had never done before. She began auditing her own family. Bank documents, credit card statements, emails, text messages. Everything that proved every penny she had sent and every broken promise Richard had made. And then she waited. She waited for the moment when Richard would reveal who he really was. That moment arrived 6 months later in the form of a cold text message at 2:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. The disinheritance message didn't come out of nowhere, though to Sarah it seemed surprisingly abrupt in its casual cruelty. The trigger had been something seemingly small, but which revealed the true nature of the family dynamic. 3 days earlier, Sarah had committed the unforgivable sin of saying no. Richard had called asking for another $20,000, this time for an incredible investment opportunity that would expand the restaurants. Sarah, still financially exhausted and emotionally wounded by the conversation she'd overheard months before, simply said, "Dad, I can't. I don't have that money anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was icy. "You can't or you don't want to?" Richard's voice was low, dangerous. "I can't," Sarah repeated, keeping her voice steady. "I already lent you $127,000. I need to rebuild my savings." "I lent you?" Richard let out a bitter laugh. "You think that was a loan? That was you contributing to the family, Sarah. Or have you forgotten everything we've done for you? Who paid for your college?" "I paid for my college," Sarah corrected calmly, "with student loans that I'm still paying off. You contributed $5,000 in your first year, and I appreciate that, but you didn't pay for my entire education." "Always ungrateful," Richard spat the words, "always making sure to remember every little detail, every number. That's why you'll never be happy, Sarah. You don't understand what it means to be part of a real family." "And what does it mean, Dad?" Sarah heard her own voice sound colder than she intended. "Does it mean Marcus can spend $50,000 on a sports car while I empty my savings to save your restaurants? Does it mean I can hear you call me useful but short-sighted to your friends while you drink wine I helped pay for?" Another silence, this one longer. When Richard spoke again, his voice was different, calculated. "So you spied on us. You came into our house uninvited and spied on us." "I went to Mom's birthday party," Sarah said, "but clearly I wasn't invited to the party, just like I'm not invited to many things apparently." "Because you don't fit in," Richard said brutally. "You never fit in, Sarah. Always so serious, always so judgmental. Always acting like you're better than all of us just because you have a boring corporate job. Marcus may not have your salary, but he has something you'll never have. He has warmth. People like him." The words should have hurt, and they did, but Sarah felt something stronger than pain. She felt liberation. "So I guess I don't need to pretend I belong anymore," she said softly. "I'm not sending money anymore, Dad. I need to take care of my own life now." "If you do that," Richard said, his voice now a clear threat, "you're no longer my daughter, simple as that. You choose whether you stay with the family or you stay alone. What will it be?" Sarah closed her eyes. 29 years of conditioning screamed at her to give in, apologize, send the money, do anything to avoid abandonment. But a younger, stronger voice, the one that had been born the night she heard the truth about how her family saw her, said something different.
"I choose myself," Sarah said, and hung up. The disinheritance notice arrived exactly 72 hours later. And with it, Sarah executed the plan she had been preparing for the past 3 months. First, she canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $2,000 she made to Richard's business account, an arrangement he had set up saying it was for operational emergencies. That transfer had been active for 8 months. Then she removed her name as a co-signer from 2 of the restaurant's business bank accounts, positions Richard had insisted she keep only as a backup. As a co-signer, Sarah technically had responsibility for any debt, but no real control or benefit. Next, she canceled the supplemental business credit card that was in her name, but that Marcus used freely. The statements for that card over the past 6 months showed charges at bars, designer clothing stores, and even a trip to Las Vegas, all being automatically paid from Sarah's account. Finally, and most painfully, she sent a formal notification to the bank that had lent $200,000 for the restaurant's most recent expansion, a loan for which Sarah had served as a personal guarantor. She invoked the guarantor removal clause, something possible if the guarantor could prove a significant change in personal financial circumstances. Sarah attached the disinheritance notice as proof that family ties had been formally severed. Sarah did all this quietly, without drama, without confrontation, just cold, technical actions that any competent financial manager would execute. She meticulously documented every step. The first call came 18 hours later from her mother, Patricia, hysterical in a way Sarah had never heard before. "What have you done?" Patricia screamed as soon as Sarah answered. "The bank is saying you removed your name as guarantor. They're demanding immediate repayment of the loan or additional guarantees. They're threatening to foreclose on the restaurant, Sarah. Your brother will lose everything. Your father will lose everything. How could you do this to your own family?" Sarah maintained her neutral, professional voice, the same voice she used in difficult work meetings. "I've been disinherited, Mom. Dad made it very clear that I'm no longer part of this family. Why would I maintain financial responsibility for a business that's no longer my problem?" "You know he didn't mean it that way," Patricia tried, her voice now pleading. "Your father was angry. He said things he didn't mean. You know how he is. He's already sorry." "Then he can call me and say it in person," Sarah replied, "and he can also discuss the payment plan for the $127,000 I contributed to the family." Patricia was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "Are you really going to do this? Are you going to destroy this family over money?" "I'm not destroying anything," Sarah said calmly. "I'm just ceasing to support a structure that was destroying me. There's a difference." "You're selfish," Patricia spat the words, "always thinking of herself, always jealous of Marcus, of his relationship with his father. That's what it really is, petty jealousy." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. "Mom, if I were jealous of Marcus, I wouldn't have sent him $127,000 so he could continue being spoiled and irresponsible. I would have kept that money and watched from the sidelines while the restaurants went under years ago." "How dare you?" Patricia began, but Sarah gently interrupted her. "I was disinherited, Mom, remember? All communications must go through the lawyer. You have the family lawyer's contact. Ask Dad to share it." She hung up before Patricia could respond. In the following days, the messages came like an avalanche. Marcus sent a series of angry texts calling her a greedy bitch and a fake sister. Aunt Helen sent a long email about the importance of Christian forgiveness and honoring one's parents. Cousin Sarah barely knew suddenly had opinions about her character. What none of them knew was that Sarah had anticipated each of those responses. She had studied dysfunctional family dynamics, read about scapegoating, parentified children, and narcissistic triangulation. She knew the family would unite against her, that she would be painted as the villain, that decades of being the reliable one would be erased by the crime of finally setting boundaries. She was prepared for all of that. What she wasn't prepared for was the call she received a week later from her uncle Daniel, her brother.
Richard's younger brother, who lived in Canada and rarely got involved in family drama. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but serious, "I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago, about your father and the family money." Sarah sat down, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. "When your grandfather died 15 years ago, he left an inheritance. It was $280,000, divided equally between Richard and me. With my share, I paid for my house and invested the rest conservatively. With his, Richard was supposed to have established university funds for you and Marcus, as explicitly instructed in your grandfather's will." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "But he didn't do that, did he?" "No," Daniel confirmed. "He used it all on the restaurant. He said it would be a better investment, that it would generate more money for everyone. But the will was clear, $70,000 for you and $70,000 for Marcus, specifically reserved for education. You were entitled to that money, Sarah. And your father not only spent it, he never told you it existed." The pieces began to fall into place in Sarah's mind. "That's why he always acted like he paid for my college, even when he didn't. He should have paid, and he spent my trust fund before I even needed it." "Exactly," Daniel said sadly. "I should have said something at the time, but Richard was the older brother, always so confident, so convincing. He assured me he was making the right choice, that you would understand, that you would benefit more from a thriving family business than from a college fund. I was cowardly to believe him, but when I heard about what's happening now, about him disinheriting you after you gave him even more money, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." "Do you have proof of that?" Sarah asked, her accountant's mind already working. "I have a copy of the will," Daniel said, "and bank statements showing the initial distribution and how Richard moved the funds. I can send it all to you." 3 days later, Sarah sat in her apartment with a stack of documents that completely changed the narrative of her life. It wasn't just the $127,000 she had sent. It was the $70,000 that had been owed to her 15 years ago. It was decades of manipulation, of weaponized guilt, of being made to feel selfish for wanting anything for herself. She picked up the phone and called Richard for the first time since the disinheritance message. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Sarah?" "We need to talk," she said calmly. "About the $70,000 Grandpa left for my education. The ones you spent without telling me." The silence on the other end was absolute and revealing. Who told you this?" Richard finally managed to say. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have a copy of the will, I have the bank statements, and I have 15 years of you making me feel guilty for needing financial help when you literally stole my inheritance." "I didn't steal anything," Richard protested, but his voice was weak. "I invested in our future, in the family business." "A business that you constantly say is for Marcus to inherit, not for me," Sarah said. "Then you took my money, invested it in someone else's future, and then charged me for no longer being financially useful. And when I finally set boundaries, you disinherit me. Do you see how sick that is, Dad?" "You don't understand the pressures of running a business," Richard tried the family argument. "I did what I thought was best." For you, Sarah interrupted. You did what was best for you, not for me, never for me. And now I'm going to do what's best for me. I want the $70,000 that was legally mine, adjusted for inflation, which is approximately $102,000, and I want the $127,000 I lent to your restaurants, a total of $229,000. You have 30 days to present a payment plan or I will sue. You wouldn't do that, Richard said, but Sarah could hear the fear in his voice. It would be a scandal. It would destroy our family publicly. You publicly disowned me, Sarah reminded him. You told the whole family I'm no longer your daughter. Well, daughters don't sue parents, but creditors sue debtors, and that's what I am now, a creditor. She hung up before he could respond. The next 30 days were the hardest of Sarah's life. The family intensified their attacks. Patricia sent dramatic handwritten letters about betrayal and family dishonor. Marcus posted vague messages on social media about fake people who stab you in the back. Cousins and aunts bombarded Sarah with messages about forgiveness and family unity. But something interesting also began to happen. People Sarah didn't expect started reaching out to her with support. A distant cousin, Amanda, sent a private message. I see what you're going through. I want you to know that your family did something similar to me years ago. They borrowed $30,000 for emergencies and never paid it back. When I asked for it back, I was cut off. You're not alone. You're right to stand up for yourself. Patricia's best friend from church, Mrs. Morrison, called Sarah directly. Honey, your mother has been telling me her version of the story, but I've known Patricia for 25 years. I know your father, and I know you. I saw how they treated you at church parties, always asking you for help, never thanking you. You're doing the right thing. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Even some of Richard's friends began asking uncomfortable questions. One of his business partners, Mr. Chen, sent Sarah a carefully worded email. I worked with your father for 10 years. He always spoke of you as his trusted daughter and frequently mentioned how much you contributed to the business. If there is money owed to you, you have every right to recover it. Business is business, even in family, especially in family. The crack in Richard's narrative was widening. He was no longer the father betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. He was beginning to look like what he truly was, a man who exploited his own daughter financially and then discarded her when she was no longer useful. On the 28th day, Richard's lawyer called. My client is prepared to settle, he said formally. He is willing to acknowledge a debt of $150,000, payable over 5 years with minimal interest. In return, you sign a non-disclosure agreement and do not pursue further claims. Sarah almost laughed. Tell your client the offer is $229,000, as specified, payable over 3 years with 5% interest, or I'll file the lawsuit tomorrow, and there will be no non-disclosure agreement. I have nothing to hide. Does he? The lawyer hesitated. I'll take your counterproposal to my client. On the 30th day, Richard finally called in person. His voice was different. Lower, stripped of the arrogant authority he always carried. Sarah, please, I can't afford this. You know I can't. The restaurants are barely surviving. If you sue me, I'll lose everything. Your mother will lose the house. Marcus will have to get a real job, Sarah gently interrupted, and maybe learn to live within his means. As for your mother's house, she can do what millions of Americans do. Downsize, adjust to her real standard of living, not the standard of living financed by the daughter you discarded. Sarah, please, Richard was pleading now, something she had never heard before.
You're right. I was wrong. I treated you terribly. I spent your trust fund when I shouldn't have. I borrowed when I shouldn't have. But don't destroy me, please. I'm your father. You disowned me, Sarah reminded him, keeping her voice steady despite the tears that were beginning to burn her eyes. You cut all family ties. You said I wasn't your daughter anymore. You can't claim fatherhood now, Dad. It doesn't work that way.
I was angry, Richard said. I didn't mean it. But you did, Sarah replied, and I believed you, and I acted on it. Now you have to deal with the consequences of your words. There was a long silence. Then Richard said something that surprised Sarah. You're right, I did this to myself. But Sarah, if you sue me, you're not going to get your money back anyway. I'll declare bankruptcy. The restaurants will close, you'll spend thousands in legal fees, and won't see a single penny back. Is that what you want? Empty revenge? Sarah realized he was right. The cold logic of her financial mind confirmed. Suing Richard would likely result in a court victory, but real financial loss. He would declare bankruptcy, the assets would be liquidated, and she would be lined up with other creditors, probably recovering a fraction of what was owed to her. But there was something Sarah had learned in recent months. Not everything was about money. Some victories were more important. Here's my final offer, Sarah said. You publicly acknowledge in a written statement to the entire extended family that you owe me $229,000. You explain that this amount includes an educational trust fund you spent without permission and loans you never repaid. You publicly apologize for disinheriting me without justification, and you commit to paying $500 a month, every month, until the debt is paid off. That will take 38 years by calculation. You probably won't live to finish paying it off, but each month you'll remember what you did. Every check you sign will be a reminder. And if I agree to this? Richard asked cautiously. You don't sue? I won't sue, Sarah confirmed, but the payment agreement will be legally binding. If you are 3 months late, the total debt becomes due immediately and I will sue. And Richard, there will be no more personal contact, no calls, no family gatherings. You disowned me, remember? Let's keep it that way. You will just be a debtor making monthly payments. That's all you are to me now. The silence on the other end was heavy with the realization of what he had lost. Not just the daughter who supported him, but his daughter completely. I accept, Richard finally said, his voice breaking. I will agree to your terms. 2 weeks later, Sarah received the statement by email, copied to the entire extended family. It was short, formal, and devastating. I acknowledge that I owe my daughter Sarah $229,000, representing a $70,000 educational trust fund that I misused, and $159,000 in unpaid loans over 4 years. I apologize for not being transparent about these financial obligations and for hastily severing family ties when she sought accountability. We have established a payment agreement and I am committed to honoring this debt. Richard Thompson. The reaction was immediate and divided. Half the family sent messages of support to Sarah, many admitting they had suspected financial problems but didn't want to get involved. The other half condemned her for publicly humiliating her father. Sarah didn't respond to any of the messages. The first payment of $500 arrived on the first of the following month. Sarah deposited it without ceremony and updated her spreadsheet. Only 457 payments remained. 6 months had passed since the agreement. Sarah continued to receive the $500 monthly, punctually on the first of each month. She didn't spend the money. Every penny went into a separate account, one she had simply named Rebuilding. What Sarah didn't expect was how liberation would change her life in ways that had nothing to do with money. Without the constant emotional drain of trying to gain approval that would never come, without the emergency calls that sabotaged her weekends, without the toxic guilt poisoning every decision, Sarah began to flourish. She got a promotion at work. Her boss commented that she seemed more confident, more present. Sarah started therapy, finally processing decades of family conditioning. She traveled to places she had always wanted to visit but never had the money for because she was funding restaurants that weren't hers. She started dating someone kind, someone who was shocked when she told her story and said, "You didn't deserve any of this." Marcus tried to contact her once, 6 months later. A late-night message, "I miss my sister." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed a simple reply,
The person you miss never really existed. It was just a version of me that accepted being mistreated. She's gone, and I'm better off without her. She didn't block the number, she just didn't reply anymore. Patricia made one last attempt at Christmas, showing up at Sarah's apartment unannounced. "It's Christmas," she said when Sarah opened the door without inviting her in. "Families should be together at Christmas." "You're right," Sarah said gently. "Families should. But family isn't just DNA, Mom. It's respect, it's reciprocity, it's love that doesn't come with conditions and bills. I have family now, friends who value me, a boyfriend who treats me with dignity, colleagues who respect my work. That's my family." Patricia stood there for a moment, looking older, more frail than Sarah remembered. "Are you really not going to forgive us?" "I've already forgiven," Sarah said, and it was true. I forgave so I could move on. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, it doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean going back to a dynamic that was destroying me. She closed the door gently but firmly. Today, 2 years after the message that changed everything, Sarah sits in her new apartment, a bigger, nicer place that she can afford now that she's not supporting 3 restaurants and a spoiled adult brother. The rebuilding account has $12,000. She still receives the $500 monthly, she still updates her spreadsheet, but the money is no longer about recovering what she lost, it's about remembering what she gained. She picked up her phone and opened the notes where she kept a list that began the day she was disinherited. "Things I've learned." She read the last lines she had written. "Some people will only love you as long as you're useful. That says everything about them and nothing about you. Setting boundaries isn't selfishness, it's survival. The worst prison is the one you build with guilt and family obligation." And the last one, recently added, "Being disinherited was the best thing that ever happened to me. It freed me to inherit something far more valuable, my own life." Sarah hung up the phone and smiled. In the end, Richard was right about one thing. She had made her choice, and choosing herself was the best decision she ever made.